Now here's the Southeast Ecological Framework. This is an interactive map, and you can zoom in on any county you want, or zoom out and see the whole United States. And by the way, the entire ecological framework for the United States was supposed to be published last fall. I have not found them yet. I'm still looking. I don't know why they haven't come out and published it. But this is Kentucky, this is Virginia, and here's Tennessee. When I punch the button, you're going to see the ecological framework come into view over the states that have already been mapped. And you'll get some idea about how much land we're talking about. That's the very south end of Virginia right there. Now, there's very faint green that you may not be able to see. Those are called PEAs and SEAs, significant ecological areas and priority ecological areas. They have the same definition as does all the rest of it. Now this is a map of Virginia, and as I punch the button, this will come into view of what's already been created for Virginia, and this is conservation easements. As of 2006, the Virginia Outdoor Foundation says that there are 2,000 conservation easements already in Virginia, and that there are, over 30 regional and local private trusts seeking to bring about more conservation easements. Now, easements are absolute trap for property owners. In Colorado, there was a group of farmers that had considerable amount of land, 200,000 acres, and they wanted to preserve that land for perpetuity. They didn't want their farms developed, and so there was legislation passed at the state level, and the state government agreed to allow an appraiser to come on and determine how much their development rights were worth, and they gave them a tax break. Well, then the federal government came in and said, we will agree and also give you a tax break. Several years later, Colorado got into a bind and said, no, we disavow the accreditation of those appraisers, and now you farmers owe us back taxes for so many years. Guess what the federal government did? Same thing. So those farmers are now losing their property. Now, in other cases, what has happened is organizations such as the Nature Conservancy or Sierra Club or Audubon Society or any number of other land trusts will come in and purchase those conservation easements. The state will give them a tax break, and everybody's happy for a few years. Well, in a lot of cases, those organizations have harangued the property owner to the point where they cannot stand it. They can, a lot of times, come on the property without notice, without even letting the property owner know. And those property owners then can't do anything about it. They usually are just common people like I am, don't have a lot of resources. They can't defend themselves against this kind of harangue, so they decide they want to sell. Now, who's going to buy the remaining rights? Nobody except the Nature Conservancy. Well, just as soon as those organizations buy the remaining rights and they hold the conservation easement, the entity becomes one and they can eliminate the easement. And in most cases where they have done this already, they have developed the land, drilled for oil, dug for minerals, whatever they wanted to do. One place up north, they actually put in some condominiums over some pristine lakes and rivers. So you kind of get an idea about what this has done to individuals. And by the way, until the 1980s, conservation easements did not exist because it's a negative concept in law. Did not exist under common law. So now let's pick up on energy and sustainability. And just a couple of slides here. This is a survey that I received in the mail from Alabama Power. Now, I don't know if you know it or not, but you already have a smart meter. I do on my house. It's been there for a number of years. And in this survey, Alabama Power wanted to know how many screw-in fluorescent light bulbs I have, how many square feet, how many air conditioners, how many people live there. I rather think they already know everything, but they wanted to know it anyway. So I sent them a note, and I said, Ms. Smith, she's over this particular project, regarding Alabama Power's customer energy survey, will the information that I provide by taking this survey help in determining my household's ecological footprint? And how will the information that is collectively gathered be factored into greenhouse credits that enable Alabama Power to produce electricity sustainably? I believe that sustainable development is truly an untold story. I hope that Alabama Power can do their part in bringing this important issue to the front page of public discussion. So she sent back and said, well, first regarding your ecological footprint, Alabama Power had to produce 6.93 metric tons of CO2 in order to provide you with enough electricity, the amount of 11,548 kilowatts. And regarding the larger issue of sustainable power, they have several initiatives, and she sent me various links. Now, in Alabama, we have the PSC, Public Service Commission. We have yet to have the manpower to go before that commission and say Alabama Power is participating in greenhouse gas emissions without anybody realizing it. I don't know if you have PSC here, but all of these power companies are doing the same thing, and we need to bring this out and start talking about these kinds of issues. In England, this was a front page article from the Sunday Times, April the 20th, 2010, and it's talking about the National Grid smart meter and that it can take control of your dishwasher. And it says that the system will be able to turn on your washing machine remotely, switch off your tumble dryer, and manage how and when your energy supply is used. There was money in the stimulus package for appliances, and the new appliances are interactive with that smart meter. So if Alabama Power or Virginia Power or whoever didn't have greenhouse credits, they could shut down your refrigerator or your air conditioner in order to conserve energy, in order to fall under that greenhouse emission standard, whatever it is. Let's see, point slipped my mind right now. Oh, I know what it was. They have now a model that they look at the individual home and see how it is in comparison to an ideal home for the same occupancy, same size, and they compare that to the other neighborhood homes to determine whether or not your ecological footprint is larger than it should be. Now, I hope this brings it home that the comprehensive plan can be very invasive in our rights. Now, this is Coleman, Alabama. This is 2008, and this is the updated comprehensive plan. Now, thank God that Coleman, Alabama is losing money and in dire straits because they have laid off their planner. I am just thrilled about that.
They need to do that here in Frederick County.
I'm sure they do. All right, now the thing about this is that they have had several planners in the course of years. And the first planner wrote the plan, and he put the language that you're about to see in that plan. The next planner rewrote the plan and adopted the very same language. So this is continuity among planners over several comprehensive plan updates. Now it says that the city has 3 critical powers that enable implementation. And they are police powers, taxation, then we have budgeting and eminent domain. Now, the use of police power includes the following. Aesthetics. Now, I don't know if you know it or not, but you'll wind up with a stakeholder group in your community to determine whether or not the outside of your house or your business is aesthetically pleasing to the community. In Gunnersville, there is was a beauty shop where the store was in downtown, right on Main Street, and the storefront is about 3 feet high. It's brick, and the owner painted it pink in honor of breast cancer. Her mother had breast cancer. Well, the code enforcement officer came by and said that does not fit the decorum of Gunnersville. So you're going to have to repaint that in order to qualify and fit the decorum of Gunnersville. Well, this became such a ridiculous thing that egg got thrown in the face of the city officials, and they acquiesced. But at some point, this is going to get much, much worse. Now, where does, and later on, you're going to see where this comes from. This is actually part of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 because it requires aesthetically pleasing surroundings. Next, in this sentence, oh, by the way, this is my comment below. That's aesthetics and then comma. And next is profitable use. Now, if you want to look up something, look up unjust enrichment in parentheses and sustainable development. Now, I truly don't know what kind of examples will be from unjust enrichment, but I think I know where the concept comes from. And that's what I'm going to talk about just briefly, and then we'll come back to look at the rest of this. Now, I want you to look at the graphics. We have Mother Earth gently caressing and protecting human settlements on the earth. And this was Habitat 1, 1976. And it was attended by people that call themselves an American. And I think you'll agree with me after you read what they agreed to, that they cannot be an American. They might call themselves an American, but they are not an American. Now, when I first read this, I said, this is absolutely a bold-faced lie. And I set out to prove that whoever wrote this was lying about it, because I knew that an American would not say this. Well, I sent off to the World Depository Library. There's a system of UN libraries across the world. Tallahassee, Florida, University of Florida has one of these libraries. And I sent off and I said, send me a copy of the plan of action from Habitat 1 held in Vancouver, Canada in 1976, and I want the names of the people that attended this conference. They sent me back, and sure enough, what you're about to see is verbatim in that plan. And William K. Riley, who became EPA director for Bush, he was over the oil spill under Obama in the Gulf of Mexico, was in attendance and part of the delegate. Carla Hills, who later negotiated NAFTA under Bush, was also well, actually, she wasn't also. She was lead delegate at this conference. Now, let's look at what it says. Land, because of its unique nature and crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the marketplace. So right there, we've done away with a free enterprise system. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. So, make a profit off of a parcel of land if you had committed an act of social injustice. Now, if we allow this to continue, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Social justice, urban renewal and development, the provisions of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for the people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. And it ends by saying public control of land is therefore indispensable. Now that is what would be the criteria for unjust enrichment. How it will be applied and what fuzzy words they may put on it, I have no idea, but it won't be blatant. You'll have to understand the tenets as it comes on. Now let's get back to Coleman, because after profitable use, then we have due process. Remember, that's part of your unalienable rights affirmed in the Constitution. You don't have constitutional rights. You have unalienable rights affirmed in the Constitution. That is part of the Hegelian dialectic. If you look it up, it's merely the means of using words to change principle. We don't have constitutional rights. We have unalienable rights affirmed in the Constitution. You begin to use that phrase, you'll begin to change and reverse just by speaking to people, because the concept will transfer. You don't even have to explain what you've said, because that phrase will catch on and it'll continue to go around the community. Next, freedom of speech. If they can do away with due process, certainly they could abrogate your freedom of speech. And then we have individual cost versus public benefit. Now, I truly don't know what that might mean, but I'm sure that some stakeholder committee at some point is going to determine whether or not what you're spending is producing a public benefit. Now, the criteria is, of course, yet to be seen. So we're getting close to the end. Now, this is, after reading all this for this many years, I'm going to fill in the blank. And you'll see what my thoughts are on this. This is the National Environmental Policy Act. We haven't talked about it hardly at all. It is a fundamental law. Predates all of the buzzwords that you're familiar with and have heard tonight. It has the foundational tenets of sustainable development without the buzzwords. It was passed by a very liberal Congress, and they waited on Richard Nixon to come into office in 1970. He signed it into law, and then that very same year we had the first Earth Day celebration. Now here's a quote from that law. The federal government is to assure that all Americans have a safe, healthful, productive, and aesthetically and culturally pleasing surroundings. So now you can see what responsibility the federal government thinks they have over what you see and do and how you think is aesthetically pleasing. So I thought that that ought to go certainly where the religious connotations or books used to go. Agenda 21 is a hallmark or benchmark. That ought to go right there. Well, I don't know if you have ever heard of the Council on Environmental Quality or not, but they have been called the Council of God because they determine the criteria by which federal agencies determine endangered species. In other words, God said man is given dominion over the earth, and the Council of God says, oh no, they're not. A frog has more rights than a man. So they elevate it. That's why they've been called the Council of God. I thought that ought to go where the church is. Well, did you know that we have a president who should be a king? Then we have the Environmental Protection Agency. This is actual badge. Special Agent, Office of Criminal Enforcement. You can actually have a criminal act against the environment. I thought that ought to go right there. In Birmingham, we already have the Environmental Police Force. Thought that ought to go right there. Well, if you've got the environmental police, can the political code enforcement officer be very far behind? So I put that right there. What has Congress done? Absolutely nothing. Kept their mouth shut, so they have been subservient in all of this.
Yep.
All right, here comes my next slide and final slide. And I'm going to quote the Alabama Constitution, Article 1, Section 35. Now, I was over 50 years old before I knew that the Alabama Constitution had any Bill of Rights at all. It's amazing that in this day and time, what we don't teach to our offsprings and our children. So, here it says that the sole logic and only legitimate end of government is to protect society as a whole. No, it doesn't. It says that it is to protect the citizen, the individual, in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property, and when government assumes other functions, it is usurpation and oppression. Now, let me say that everybody in the 1700s would have recognized that phrase, life, liberty, and property, because it was coined by John Locke. I have a book of sermons about that thick from the 1700s, and the preachers of the day would talk about the amazing, magnificent John Locke and what philosophy he had put forth. Well, Jefferson came along and said life and property are redundant. So he replaced property with the pursuit of happiness. Now, let me ask you this, just pose this thought to you, that if a government will not protect the first aspect of property among the most innocent among us, will they protect your property as an adult? So now, I hope that you have many questions and are curious about all this. So please, ask questions. All we need is one person to raise his hand, break the ice.